A lot colder this morning than yesterday. So back to it's very cold. Anyway, item 1. Welcome to the pension sub. The 23rd of May. Item 1. Sederunt apologies.
Thank you, Chairman. This morning we've got apologies from Graham Forster and Carr, and Graham Nicol.
Ian Dick. Oh, Ian's there. David.
Okay, that's all noted, thank you.
That's everybody accounted for. Okay, declarations of interest? None? No? Okay, thank you. Minute of the meeting of the 28th of March. Can we put the minute there? The Local Government Pension Scheme Administration Annual Update. Can we? No, that's what's coming, sorry. The minute of the meeting of the 28th. Can we approve that? Okay, thank you. Item 4, Pension Scheme Administration Annual Update Report by Assistant Chief Executive. Actually, Stuart is going to be doing it.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning. I'd just like to present my annual administration update report to members on the activities, administration activities for the pension fund. The report contains elements of regulation and pension reform updates. There's obviously quite a lot going on in the industry at the moment, and that some of the detail, the more relevant parts of that are reflected within that report. If I could maybe just look at 3.4 within the report, members might be interested to actually hear some of the key changes that are at least proposed in England and Wales thus far, although from experience we know that certainly most of those changes end up in Scotland, usually a year later in terms of the timeline. At the moment we have the final salary pension scheme for contributors, and the proposal is for a career average earning related scheme to be implemented at some point in the near future. The accrual rate that the scheme currently uses is 1/60th of pensionable pay in service, and the proposal, which has been agreed with the trade unions in England and Wales, is for that to increase to 1/49th. Obviously, it's not 1/50th; it's 1/49th. It's within their cost window. We get these strange fractions and values that are used. One of the other main proposals is that the normal pension age of 65, which is in the current scheme, is likely to move in line with state pension age from 65 to 68. The average contributions, which at the moment are broadly the same as existing of 6.5%, there doesn't look to be that much change being proposed there for employees, certainly. One of the other options that is being considered at a national level is a 50-50 scheme, whereby trying to encourage as many employees as possible to come into and have a pension. Rather than paying the full contribution rate, then there's a 50-50 option that they're looking at bringing in to encourage more people to come into the scheme. If you pay half the contribution, then you get half the benefit. It's as simple as that. The benefits accrued prior to the implementation date of any major regulatory change, they're protected under the previous set of regulations, and that's the way that the pension system works. And then finally, one of the other major changes that's been agreed in England and Wales and likely to transfer to Scotland is where there's a TUPE transfer and an outsourcing. Then the company that actually takes on the employees, they can actually change the pension environment for those staff. we've got some good history there with our TUPE transfers, where the vast majority of people that have TUPE transferred out of this council have actually continued to remain in our fund, and we've created new partnerships and working arrangements with those employers to maintain that pension provision. So we have some good practice in terms of keeping those pension provisions intact. But nevertheless, the government feels that's a really important part of pension protection going forward, and that's being strengthened as part of the new scheme rules. In terms of the report itself, apart from the regulatory and reform update, it lists the administrative activities that my section are involved in. And there's key aspects of the service and some performance indicators there that we report to you on an annual basis. In addition to that, we are required to comply with Audit Scotland requirements for reporting early retirement information, and that's contained within appendix at the back of the report. And if I could maybe draw members' attention to a couple of points within that appendix. Focusing in on the early retirement costs. As members will be aware, council policy around early retirement is that over the last 2 or 3 years, we've reduced our added years maximum from 10 to 4. And that was broadly in line with the rest of Scotland when we benchmarked against other councils. But as you can see at the bottom of the page, where we have the average number of added years awarded, and I've given you 3-year comparisons, we're actually sitting roughly at about 2 added years as an average for all staff. And obviously that's from the sort of the good governance that's built into the application of the discretion that members had to apply when the policy was agreed back in 2009. In addition to the early retirement costs that Audit Scotland require us to declare and confirm to members, obviously there are a number of early retirement costs which are listed there as one-off and ongoing costs. In addition to that, the capitalised cost of the early retirement, effectively the total cost of that retirement, which we must present to members. But not only are we required to present that to members, but we also are required to present the savings that an individual business case that's presented to the internal pensions panel, that they decide on the merits of each case, whether there's a sufficient saving to enable the early retirement, then that information is also available. So with that in mind, I'm happy to take any questions.
For that, Stuart, just a couple of things I would find it hard to believe why they want to make it 149 instead of 150. Seems a wee bit. Tom's obviously going to come up with a wonderful explanation for this.
I was going to assume that that's because you start your working life in terms of pension contributions at 18, retirement age becomes 67, 18 from 67 to 49. Is that how they arrived at it?
If it only was that easy. I think it's fair to say, and there will no doubt be an actuarial calculation behind it. There is a cost window for the scheme at government level, and the 149th will be very much in that window for them.
Can I just say as well, about the added years, we seem to have come down from 10 to an average of 2.5. There's still a feeling out there in the sticks. You hear of people, guys from the council, taking early retirement. And you get the Joe blogs saying to you, oh, we're a bloody big package and all the rest of it. I think from what Stuart's saying, that really isn't the case nowadays. Stuart?
Well, obviously, the numbers speak for themselves. I think that's a really important point. I think also the fact that our, the higher salary, I suppose, instances of retirement tend to get the most publicity. But obviously, from a workforce perspective, the vast majority of people who retire with a couple of added years are at the more modest salary scale. And I think the council's average salary at the moment, I think, is about 23,000.
Tom was wanting.
Yeah, I mean, I think with a bit of an argument with the added years thing at the last full council, we won't all get into the individual details, but always felt it should have been left open for particularly members to interpret. I didn't have any great sympathy about giving a director who's on a salary of £100,000, if he's got 32 years service, he's going to get an adequate pension anyway. And I'm not so sure about added years there. But I do appreciate that you've got people who've maybe been in manual jobs who are, they can't retire through ill health because it doesn't come to that. But if you've got somebody in a manual job whose salary is only 18,000, I'm more than happy to give them 7 or 8 years to take them up to their pension. It's always a fat cats we hear about at full council, but I mean, you can actually look at the people further down the line. Some of their pensions aren't all that great at all. And indeed, there isn't really the scope in a lot of cases for male or females on the lesser grades to even contemplate early retirement. Even if they had maximum 40-year service in, and they're only earning like 18 grand a year, their pension's only going to be £9,000, which, if they happen to be 55, 56 years of age, they might still have mortgage payments, they may still have children at university to look after, that kind of thing. So in the main, we've tended to look at the early retirement for those who quite frankly, have had a good innings, and I'm not so sympathetic towards any of them getting added years at any stage. But I think we need to take a look at how we treat folk further down the order.
Okay, I think Stephen was wanting, and so I'll take Stephen and then Ian and Ian. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it was just a quick question on the seeming anomaly, or the figure that jumps out anyway is 2011-12 capitalised cost of early retirement, where it goes from 2.4 million in 2010-11 right up to 4.35 million and then back down to 1.193 million in 2012-13. And I notice above, obviously, the number of types of retirement, 2011-12, there's 132 redundancies. I was just wondering if that was linked or if that's just coincidence.
I think with the capitalised costs, the more retirements there are, the higher the capitalised cost. Where there's a redundancy payment, that doesn't necessarily mean there's a pension in payment as well, so the redundancy is separate from that.
Thank you. I think just going back to, it's 3.6. I think the last sentence in there says that there's no intention, I think, the Scottish Government, but interested to know and understand the reasons for the government looking at that in Wales. And the no single normal scheme pension age new scheme would link normal scheme pension age to revised state pension age, currently 65 to 68. How are the police affected with that?
In terms of the whys, there's not a huge amount of intelligence out there as to why there's this feeling that the LGPS needs to be removed from councillors. I think that was quite a surprise to most people, given that actually it's only been implemented over the last 4 or 5 years. So, I can't answer the reason particularly why. I could speculate, but I won't do that. I think, obviously, I'm trying to remain factual in terms of what I've been able to give members an impression of, to say that, things may be changing down south. Scottish Government have given me an assurance that that's not the case at the moment, I guess it's fair to say, but I felt it would be useful for members to at least have that information to hand. In terms of the police service, retirement ages within the police service have already moved from what was, to, in a lot of areas, a very early retirement ages. That's not to say that police and fire officers can't retire still early, but moving from a sort of age 48 and a half to 50 to 55, and actually there's no longer any limit to the length of service that they have to accrue, or indeed the age that they have to work to retire. So they are being treated differently, but they still have the opportunity to retire when they've achieved their full service, even if that happens to be at 56, 57, 58. They're not being tied into the SPA rules.
Okay, Ian Dick.
Yeah, that's in the appendix. There's quite a drop between 2010-11 to 12-13 in the contributions received to the fund. Are you anticipating any funding problems as far as that's concerned? Are we going to still be able to maintain the income to cover the outgoings?
I'm not really involved in terms of whether the contributions will meet the funding side. That would obviously be colleagues within Treasury that would look at that. And obviously, there's an expectation through the valuation process that contributions will meet the liabilities. And obviously, where that isn't met from one reason or another, employer contribution rates are generally used to supplement that. Obviously, the 2012-13 contribution received to the fund figure is not finalised as yet, so perhaps that's still subject to change.
Okay, Ronnie Ogilvie and then Andrew Wood.
It's really moving from career average earnings, from the final pension scheme, and I see unions and COSLA and agreement. It'd be interesting to hear from the trade union side, because all these that I've read about tend to be less at the end, because it's career average rather than your last 3 years as a normal one would be. So that was my first question, was what, obviously it's a negotiated. But our pension scheme, is most pension schemes standalone schemes. I mean, all the years I've been on here, it's our scheme. We administer it. So is there a compulsion on us to take on board some of this top-down changes? Because we've adjusted our pension scheme to suit local needs. That's the way I've understood it over the years. So there's two questions here. One, if Tom's in a position to answer what the trade union says, think about the career average as opposed to final earnings, and is our scheme a standalone scheme which we can administer without interference?
As far as I know, final salary is but a career average is slightly better for in general. It's, would have been an average not necessarily better. Seems to be an improvement. What was the other question?
Thanks for that. I mean, I think I attended a seminar at Hyman's Robertson a number of years ago when career average was being mooted as a potential change to the scheme. And it very much signalled to me for the first time that actually career average is not something to fear from a workforce perspective. I think given the smoothing that it brings into an average career, it breaks the staccato career jumps that people are involved in, and it avoids that. And the vast majority of the workforce tend to have a smoother career path, and I think therefore career average tends to be more suitable. I think it's fair to say from that perspective, and I think it supports what Tom's saying. In terms of what we can agree locally versus nationally, our pension regulations are devolved to Scottish Government, so despite the fact that I've mentioned that these are agreements in England and Wales, Scottish ministers do have some discretion upon which to design the scheme. But of course, they're very much tied into the cost model that HM Treasury builds into that. So, and I think potentially with the way the pensions bill has been drafted, I think there's probably less chance that Scottish ministers will be able to deviate from the Westminster proposals. I think that's the first point I would say. The second point is that once those pension regulations have been enacted and they're actually in force, then we must comply with those. We have no discretion. And the only areas that we have discretion is where it explicitly tells us we have local discretion.
Okay, Andrew, and then we'll try and move on, I think. Or Tom after Andrew, and then we'll try and move on.
Thank you, Chair. It's with regard to 3.13, where we're talking about diversifying into additional support on the teacher's pension. Can you expand on that and give us some clarification as to why that's come about? And then the other part, which I'm pleased to note, is that you've taken on a modern apprentice. And I was wondering if this is going to be an annual rolling on sort of initiative that you've undertaken.
Certainly. Certainly, Councillor. In terms of the teacher side, obviously the teachers' pensions are administered by the Scottish Public Pensions Agency and Galashiels. There's a fairly arm's length approach to the way that they administer nationally across Scotland. So with their agreement and support, we actually arrange seminars and we meet with teachers who are potentially retiring and we provide them with the information from the scheme perspective. And also, and they find that valuable, that there's a local contact, if you like. We don't actually have ultimate responsibility, but we feel it's a good partnership arrangement that we're involved in. Obviously, during this change time that the council finds itself in, there's a number of teachers retiring, and particularly through the Teacher Refresh scheme. Now, any early retirement benefits that are awarded to teachers retiring, that's something that's determined locally in the same way that it's determined locally for the local government scheme. So we administer that now. We deal with that. So that's our involvement in the teacher side. In terms of the modern apprentice, you know, I'm delighted that we've got a modern apprentice within the team. It's quite a challenging role. It's a complex role, even at the kind of lower levels. But our modern apprentice is doing really well. We've got the modern apprentice. Her name's Ellis. I'll refer to her as Ellis. She's with us for 3 years. So, you know, she's on a full training programme, and we hope, obviously, one of the commitments that I had to give as part of the MA Plus scheme was that there was a real opportunity for her at the end of it, and it wasn't just an apprenticeship and move on. So, you know, I'm hopeful, all going well, that she'll remain with us, and it's part of our succession plan.
Well, just seeking a bit more clarification on the apprenticeship, I did ask if it was an ongoing initiative. So are we going to be taking another one on next year and the following year? Because, as you said, it's a 3-year apprenticeship, and I just wondered if it was
Within my relatively small section, I've only have the justification and capacity for one modern apprentice, and that's what the workload demands as well. So, you know, I will always consider, particularly within human resources, given that we are the champions of the modern apprentice schemes council-wide, that we will always consider that whenever there's a rollout of the next stage of the modern apprentice scheme, if there's an opportunity, even within the wider HR that I've got some responsibility over, then we will look at that positively.
Okay, last word to Councillor McCaughtrey.
Yeah, I'm just, I mean, if we now cut the accrual rate to 49, then I assume you won't be looking at so many early retirements. Because, you know, when it started off, up at, what, 5 years ago, it was 1/80th. Therefore, to get half your pension, you have to work 40 years. If you're now going to 49s, to get half your pension, you'll have to work 25 years. Which effectively means, if you could get away with it, if other regulations changed, you could probably retire before you're 50. I mean, are there any safeguards built in here to ensure, I mean, what's more interesting, how much actuarial work has been done on this? Because bearing in mind, well, one of the reasons the pension funds got burnt, that a few years ago we didn't pay enough attention to the actuarial longevity of people. I mean, I think 25 years ago we were estimating if a man retired at 65, if he was a manual worker, he'd be dead when he was 70, chief executive lived to be 75, and that's always the way anyway. The higher paid guys who have higher pensions live longer, so they're a bigger strain in the fund. That's my worry, that you have a whole host of people who, to be fair, if it's done by the CPI, in fact, the career average, the way local government wages are repressed by successive governments, your CPI on your first year could actually be higher than your final year's pension, but once you annualise it and compound it. So I'm just wondering how much actuarial work's been done in this. Because you could have the ludicrous, I mean, we've already had people who retired at 55 and lived to be 80, who actually earn more in their pension than they ever earned in their entire working career, and certainly took out more in their pension than they ever paid in contributions. I'm just worried that this could have a really adverse effect on the fund without some safeguards put in there.
You better be quick, Stuart, because I can't have many years left, according to Tom. Ian had better be quick as well, get this item finished.
I think it's fair to say that you know, the reason we've got actuaries is because these are very detailed and complex calculations, and they're certainly way above my head. But what I can say to Councillor McCautry is that in the design of the scheme in England and Wales, the government actuary has been very heavily involved in supporting the government in the development of the scheme. And I'm sure that there are, you know, reams and reams of calculations on how the scheme should be costed and funded for the next generation. I think one of the things from an administration perspective, bringing it back to the kind of local dimension, because we have had so much reform over the past 10 years, what we're actually finding that it will be a generation to come before we actually start to see the full effect of these changes, because what my team have to kind of deal with in over the next 20, 30, 40 years is that some part of people's pension will be based in 80th, some parts will be based in 60th, and some parts will be based in 49. Now, the real challenge for us as an administering authority is how do we actually communicate that to the worker, the person who's receiving these benefits, and how do they really truthfully understand the monetary amounts that we are giving them? That's the big challenge for us locally, is how we communicate in simple terms what is becoming ever more complex.
That's true. I mean, that'd be, if there's actually a link to this, give me after the meeting, because I'm always interested in these kind of things. And just as an aside, I think it might be interesting to have a training session for members and how the actuaries work out the length of time certain. I mean, I remember attending one up in Glasgow, I think it was, with, I don't know if you were there, George, with Ronnie Bowie, who famously gave evidence to the Parliamentary Committee last week. He's now been elevated to a very senior position, but he was just a junior Scottish guy at that time. But I think it'd be interesting for members to see how these calculations are made. But particularly, you know, that somebody's background, how long they're likely to live, different parts of the country. That's why you can get insurance by the phone now. They've got it on the computer. You just look it up. Stay in Dumfries, you're a chief executive. What age are you now? 55. Okay, you'll live to be 80. It's such and such. You're a manual worker in Dumfries. You're only going to live to be 70. It's such and such. And it's quite interesting seeing how the actuaries actually come to all these. Well, if you're interested in that kind of thing.
Taking that on board, Andy. Right, definitely the last word to Ian Carruthers.
There was 2 points. Tom picked up in the last bit of the training session. I think it's very important on this topic, with some clear examples. Tom referred to previous retirements at a high level. And just, I'd like to see a worked example of how the career average would have affected that. And that would be nice to see, and a lot of other information out with. And those pensions schemes were criticised this morning in the news at a national level. I think it's more around about health, but used to, I think local governments were pretty much okay, but just to get if there's any updates on that, I think you're aware of that.
Maybe it would be beneficial to members. Are you thinking about that? You know, the like of Stuart. I mean, Stuart can give us all the information that we actually were requiring, I think. Andy, are you wanting?
I think if you're asking for a training session from the actuaries regarding how they calculate lifespan and who's what and where and why people in Clydeside die when they're 23 and all this, that we could arrange that, I think, quite easy. Most of the stuff they come up with is from tables, and it's all statistics. It's been built up over years and etc. But I mean, I'm assuming that they'd be quite happy to come down and explain it all. Obviously, it's one of the things that they take account of when they're doing their annual valuation. It's built into everybody's future service rates, etc. But yeah, I mean, I can get in touch with them, ask them to come down and present to you, just to give you.
I'll leave it in your capable hands, Andy. Okay. Right, we're on to item 5, any other business. Before we, any other business need to be discussed? No. Item 6, Local Government Act 1973, consider the adoption of resolution to exclude the public. Did we do that? Great. Item 7,